Is there actually such a thing as an uncommanded discharge, or is that a term that some people just made up recently to demonize a specific firearm and take the responsibility off of the people that misused it? Hey everybody, Yankee here. You know, it seems like I said something surprise, surprise the other day that ticked some people off that I never thought would tick some people off. It seems like no matter how innocuous you think something is, some people are looking for a reason to be angry, and they will do whatever they got to do to justify that anger. And what I said that made some people mad is that the term uncommanded discharge is BS. It's not something we need, it doesn't make sense, and it just muddies the water. Because here's the reality. When you look up uncommanded discharge, what does it say that means? It means basically that a gun fired when you didn't want it to, either through malfunction or user error. Well, why would you need to lump those two things together? We already have a term for both of those. We have negligent discharge, which is harder to say than uncommanded discharge, but it's the actual proper term, when the user error is the problem. And we have malfunctions for the rare occasion that a gun operates in a way it wasn't designed to operate. Now, malfunctions are rare. You don't use that term very often. It's usually negligent discharge because 99.9% of the time, the problem in the equation is the meat puppet actually using the tool, or the tool using the tool. So negligent discharge is the proper term when a gun goes off through user error. You know, it's operating as it was intended to operate, but the user did something wrong with it. Malfunction is when it does something it's not supposed to do. Like with the Remington 700, when it would fire when you took the safety off. That's a malfunction. Like that lady who killed her own child because she took the safety off and shot her child. Although I don't know why she was pointing the gun at her kid when she took the safety off. That's user error right there, the death. But that's a malfunction. That's why the safety rules exist, just in case people wonder, because things like malfunctions and more often negligence happen. But as I was saying, that's a malfunction. And when it happened, people were able to recreate it. People could show you, here's what it's doing. They didn't have to come up with these contrived situations and create fanciful scenarios where it could possibly maybe happen if the moon was in the right phase and Mars was aligned with Jupiter and you screwed something where it wasn't supposed to be. You know, they didn't have to do that. They could show that this gun is malfunctioning. And even that was blown out of proportion. You know, 3/4 of the guns they ever made have never been repaired and there hasn't been a problem with them. The very fact that it was a voluntary recall shows you it wasn't really that likely it was going to be an issue. And most people didn't worry about it because they didn't get their guns fixed. But like I said, that was, though, a true malfunction. What happened with like the SIG P320, what happened with the Glocks back in the 80s and 90s, that's user error. It's not an uncommanded discharge. That's a negligent discharge. The uncommanded discharge was just made up by a bunch of leftists who were wanting to muddy the waters over whether guns were safe or not. And then they handed it out to the talking heads on YouTube who were more than willing to repeat it for money. And it just spread. But no, uncommanded discharge is not the proper term. It's either negligent discharge or it's malfunction. Now, if you drop a gun and it goes off, well, unless that gun actually is made to be drop safe, like if it's a Shadow 2 from CZ and you drop it, it goes off, that's not a malfunction. That's user error. That's negligent discharge. Because dropping your gun on the ground, knowing that it's a gun made for competition, doesn't have a drop safety in it, doesn't have a firing pin block, that's negligence. So that's a negligent discharge. That wouldn't be an uncommanded discharge. Now, if you drop a gun that has a firing pin block, has a drop safety, and it goes off, that's a malfunction. Still, there was user error there that caused it, but it shouldn't have gone off, so you could kind of say that's a malfunction because the gun didn't operate as intended. So those are the only two terms you need: negligent discharge and malfunction. This uncommanded discharge, that was just a way for people who knew the problems that were happening were with the user, but they wanted a term that kind of muddied who was at fault. Was it the gun? Was it the manufacturer? Was it the user? So they created this term uncommanded discharge that included both. And you don't need that term because you've already got a term for when it is a negligent discharge and for when it is a malfunction. You didn't need to take them both and put them under another term that would just, like I said, make it unclear to people when you're talking about it, what was at fault, the tool or the person using it. So that's why this uncommanded discharge isn't really a thing. You didn't see it 2 years ago, much less 20 years ago. There was user error and there was malfunction, negligent discharge and malfunction. And like I said, 99.9% of the time, it's negligent discharge, just like it was with the P320s. And that's pretty much been proven now. Anybody that says otherwise is a little bit slow because this is now the most tested gun on the market. And can't find anything wrong with it. Also, the Glocks. Like in the 80s and 90s when people were having all the problems with them and FBI said they're wholly unsafe. Well, they've been around now for quite a while. And people are still here. They're not going off willy-nilly. Because as long as users use them properly, they're okay. Now, I don't consider them safe for carry because there's too much potential with both of those guns. Most striker-fired guns that don't have safeties, I don't think they're safe for carry. But if one of them goes off, chances are it was because of your negligence. If one malfunctions, well, then that's not your problem. That's not your fault. Now, if someone is harmed when that gun malfunctions, like you got it in your hand and you're doing something, and it goes off and it hurts someone, well, that's negligence. The fact that you hurt them is negligent because you should never be pointing that gun at anybody ever, unless you're actually intending to shoot them. But like I said, when it comes to guns doing something they shouldn't do, that's a malfunction. When guns doing what they're supposed to do at the wrong time because someone's an idiot, that's a negligent discharge. That's user error. Those are the only terms we need. We don't need uncommanded discharge because, like I said, that was just created to blur the lines so that you could blame the tool instead of blaming the person using it without actually blaming the tool. But you could leave it open for interpretation. Words like that are used to manipulate issues, distort issues, and we don't need it. All we need is negligent discharge and malfunction.